Explorations in biomaterials has been quite big in the last like 5 years in the world. It's massive. It's suddenly a legit industry of its own. Every other person, you have people making coasters with coffee grounds that are waste. You have people using waste from breweries and making like lamps out of it and shades out. So there's a lot of opportunity of from especially from the art and design community where they've really started experimenting and doing these things. But when you really look at, like I was telling you, I'm fascinated by indigenous communities, and having been born in one, you see that much more closely. We've naturally worked with bio-waste materials a lot, whether it is from our leaf plates or it is from our dung plastered houses, or it is from the kind of roofing that we used to make with clay and natural materials, right?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tiny Farm Friends podcast. The central theme of our podcast is the power of curiosity to catalyze both personal and societal change. Our favorite people are the ones who question everything and ask what ifs and whys. Our guest today, Itika Gupta, is one such person. A curious kid from the Himalayas, she sees the world as systems, connections, networks, patterns, and overlaps. She is also the founding partner at the Studio Carbon, a studio that works at the intersection of design, systems, and storytelling. We talk about their project Dungse, Cow Dung composites created in collaboration with Studio Lindey Cafsia. Dungse aims to give the age-old material cow dung a contemporary spin by combining modern design technologies with the ancient indigenous knowledge. Itika's curiosity and energy to innovate and make this world a better place is infectious. We are sure it will rub on you and inspire you. We hope you enjoy this conversation. So, Itika, can you please tell us about yourself and also briefly walk us through the journey of creating Dungse and Studio Carbon?
So, okay. So, hi, my name's Itika. I am a trained industrial designer and systems designer. Although before design really happened to me, I've explored and studied everything from electrical engineering to liberal arts to also business. Design is where I found solace because for me, design was a space which was ambiguous enough to allow you to connect the dots between all these different streams. So almost functioning like a glue where multiple thinking paradigms can talk to each other and then creating something tangible for the world out of it. So that's a little bit about me, talking about the work that I do. So Studio Carbon is a collective of 9 designers who started this company together, and all 9 of us landed up starting it almost when we were wrapping up college. And the main reason for doing that was we realized for the kind of work we wanted to do and the impact we wanted to create with design, there was very little room for us to do that fearlessly and boundlessly with an employer. So we thought, let's experiment and create something of our own and see if we can be financially viable while making the impact we want. We're 3 years old now, so it's so far so good. It's worked out well. As a part of the studio itself, so Studio Carbon is a consultancy, of course. So we offer design services to all kinds of organizations from around the world. But to do work that we're very passionate about or ideas that we want to explore and experiment with, we do within the domain of carbon labs in the studio. And Dungse was one such idea that we conceptualized and explored in the labs. And it's 2 years old now. So in the summer of 2019 is when we first started working on Dungse. And it's sort of sustained through that and taken a life of its own. So Dungse is becoming a company of its own now. And yeah, that's a little bit about both where it all began. And I think as we proceed, I'll tell you more about how.
Yeah, cow dung is already a circular material. It is already biodegradable.
Yeah.
So why was it a good alternate or a good choice to choose to create a biocomposite in the first place?
Very good question. Also, a question we get all the time. My main answer and the main thing I want to point out over here is it's an assumption. It's an assumption when we say that cow dung is a sustainable material because we're talking of cow dung in isolation. We're talking of it as a sole single material in your hand right now. That's not how cow dung exists in the world. Our essential assumption of saying cow dung is definitely, it's called nutrients, it's a great source of manure, it's nature's own way of using resources and putting
Right.
nutrients back into the soil, but we don't work in tandem with nature right now. These practices were great when we had lesser people on earth. We had indigenous communities which were self-sufficient, which were using water, soil, material, food, all resources in and around themselves to be able to sustain themselves. So dung was a great material at that time, of course, to whatever their cows produced, they could use up in the region. But in today's world, especially in dairy centric countries like the Netherlands and India, we have more than 1,000 cows per square kilometer. In the Netherlands, to give you an estimate, we have 1.6 million dairy cows alone. And Netherlands, we know, is a very small country in terms of size. India, on the other hand, has close to 3,000 lakh cows. And I'm pretty sure it doesn't count the number of strays completely in it because there's no
Yeah.
way to document that. But with that kind of volumes, what I'm trying to say is the volume of dung we produce is immense. And while it's a great resource with both its cellulose and fiber, as well as these nutrients of phosphates and nitrates, there is actually a limit to the amount of nutrients we should be putting down into the soil, that the soil is accustomed to. If we are oversaturating it with nitrates and phosphates, that's also a problem. That is a form of
True.
soil and water pollution. So one of the problems has just been surplus. There's a lot of excess we have, which is more than the manure we can handle. And the second thing to talk about over here is, especially, I mean, again, actually, it's true for both the countries. We have very little thought given into the scope of storing this dung. So even if I have a lot of dung and I want to use it as manure in the future, there is no process that we very actively undertake to store it. And what you'll end up doing is you're just piling dung one on top of the other every day, which is a mixture of the biomass, water, cellulose, everything in it.
Right.
And specifically the layers of water start making that pile anaerobic. When it's anaerobic, it's fermenting. When it's fermenting, you're releasing methane into the air. So until and unless I am consciously and very actively composting the manure and then using in my soil, if I'm just storing it in a pile, I'm heavily contributing to greenhouse gases. So for us, the idea was always to understand how much surplus there is in the world and is there something we can do with the surplus. So the idea, even now when we're making our business model, the idea has not been to touch and calculate our business potential based on the volume of dung in the world. It's purely on a conservative estimate of the surplus. And that definitely has a lot of opportunity. So that's, I think, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, now I actually get it. Like, what are the some of the excess problems that cow dung creates, and that is true. Like, even if when you're home gardening, when you put excess manure, you don't see the results.
The interesting part over here is, and I mean, I'd love for all of us to think about it. When we say unnatural, what is unnatural? I mean, essentially
That
everything,
is a
for that
good
matter,
question.
even
Yeah.
plastics born out of materials from
Even
the earth,
cement
right?
is, yeah, right,
So,
exactly.
so what exactly do you define as unnatural becomes very important, and
Mm.
that's why in sustainability conversations, even for us, it's very important to define our boundary of where will we, sort of stop, where will we stop exploring and experimenting. Now, with Dungse, our principle firstly was everything that we created, our idea was to use anything between 50 to 80% cow dung as its main raw material. So majority of the material in all the composites is cow dung. Within cow dung, we have experimented with using dung in different states of its matter, so to say. So we've used fresh dung that's nice and hot and just out of the cow. We've used dung that's mixed with urine. We've used dung that has been dewatered, so it's very, very dry. We have used even dung ash for that matter. We've done some experiments with a mixture of dung and dung ash. So
Okay.
all those forms of dung go into the composites. Now, in terms of other materials that we have to add into dung, we had made three categories of those. So there were some materials which we took, which were waste from like a food industry. We've taken food like mulch and other waste that you naturally have in nature. Netherlands, for example, has a lot of weed grass that grows, and that's a menace every year in the country. So a lot of these natural materials and fibers that were available were also something that we incorporated. So when we made composites with these, we were actually able to make completely biodegradable composites with that. So that's one category. The second category was to make composites that are compostable, not biodegradable, which means if I just throw it outside, it's not going to vanish tomorrow, but composites that can be composted in industrial environments when they are done with their lifetime. They were also made with bio-based materials. So we had added natural bio-based materials in it, but the material was such that if I put it in my garden, for example, if I made tiles in my garden with it, they're not going to dissolve, because that's a property we need, right? We need it to sustain for a while. Only then will it be useful for people. But it can still be composted and the nutrients can be extracted. And then we also, because it was an experiment, we went ahead and tried to even use materials that you just mentioned, use cement, use clay, use materials that we are currently mining from the earth, see how we can make composites with those. And the reason of doing that was, imagine if I make one tile with pure cement, with conventional concrete, versus a tile which is made with a composite that we have biologically and chemically sort of studied well, between cow dung and cement. And I'm using about 40% less cement in that same tile. Would that be considered social impact enough or not? So we didn't hold back as such into what we want to try. But the composites that we're now proceeding with, the ones that we're taking to the market right now, are composites that are completely biodegradable in industrial environments, so that they can sustain. I can use it like I use wood. I can use it for like a decade or two, like I would a wooden piece of furniture or like a wall plaster in my house or things like that. So the aim is to make it last, because making things lasting and not obsolete very quickly is also a form of sustainability. So we're trying to achieve that.
True. So, what are some of the industries that Dungse as a product or a range of products is looking to disrupt right now?
I mean, we're still figuring that one out. So there's one
Mhm.
industry we've already disrupted, or at least started work to disrupt, which is the wildlife products industry.
I see.
With the growing cities, we're trying to build a lot of products that bring biodiversity back into our cities. So bird houses, hedgehog houses, interesting tiles and floors that can penetrate water back to the ground level and things like that. So we're in partnership with one European leader in wildlife products, a company that leads wildlife products in Europe and essentially in most parts of the Western world. And we're making bird houses with them. So their
Very
current bird
interesting.
houses were made purely with cement. Now we're using their same machines, the same production techniques, the same factory, just tweaking the whole thing around to make it viable for production using Dungse. So that's one industry that was very easy for us to sort of convert quickly. They came to us, but then we sort of mutually realized it's a great opportunity. But that was also easy because no humans were involved. We're making it for birds and we're making it for hedgehogs and animals like that. So there's no convincing needed. But other than that, we've had industries. So we've had a lot of home building and construction industry people reach out to us. We've had people who've asked us if we can make light roofing tiles. So dung as a material, whoever's experienced it knows once it dries up, it's extremely light because of the cellulose in it. So we've had people who wanted us to make lighter roof tiles for them, based on in comparison to their conventional tiles. We've had BMW reach out to us and see if there are things that they could imagine to do for the car interiors with a new kind of composite with cow dung. That's of course a stretch right now,
Yeah.
but we're in conversations. We've had the building industry ask if we can make tiles for them, we can make bricks for them, can we make plaster for them. In Europe, they are actively looking for insulation materials between walls. And for everyone who's experienced cow dung in India, for example, you know that when a house is made with mud and dung, it's naturally resilient to temperatures. It's not going to get very cold in winters. It's not going to be very warm in summers. There's something in cow dung which, of course, helps with the insulating the temperatures and differentiating between indoor outdoor. So that's an opportunity that people are excited about. Because again, of its fibers, acoustics is another industry. We had tried making a speaker. We had made an active speaker and displayed it at the Dutch Design Week, just to show people what was possible. I'm not a scientist, a sound engineer to say if the acoustics were great, but there's definitely, again, potential over there because natural materials like wool are also very popular for acoustic facades in the house. So there's the industry scope is very wide. It's like saying what industry is wood valid for. It's like a million things, right? So we're still exploring. For us, it's very important to see which industry can we create the most impact in, but also which industry will be faster to take up innovative ideas. For example, the building construction industry is generally one of the most conservative industries. So if you want to make something with them, you need a lot of certifications and proofs already before they say yes to you. So it's a little bit of, yeah, where do we start? So we started with bird houses. Hopefully we'll get to human houses in a couple of years.
Fascinating. So we talked about properties, say insulation and acoustics. So what are some other properties that the finished biocomposites achieve when it comes to, say, fire resistance or water resistance, or
Yeah.
how similar are these properties displayed by Dungse products compared to their traditional counterparts?
So you can manipulate properties. There are some which are just there, and there are some you can manipulate. Lightweight, like I was telling you, is a property that we've seen consistently across our products. They're very, very light, the tiles. So that's there. Another property, and there's an Indian researcher, an Indian PhD scientist here in TU Delft, who we've also been collaborating with. Through his research, we also learned. So we always knew that cow dung, once it's dried up, doesn't dissolve in water anymore. So it's partially water repellent, so to say, not completely hydrophobic, but at least partially. And through his research, we understood a little bit of why. Because compared to all the animals, like why can't we use, sorry for the word, but shit from other animals? Why can't we use chicken shit or pig shit? There's a reason for that. Bovine species like cows specifically have a certain element of, certain attributes in their biomass. And I think Yash will be able to tell you that better, the scientist I'm telling you. But that's another natural property that we can really exploit, which we were very excited to explore. We used to do frugal experiments. So we used to put things like just tiles in buckets and just see what happens. Do they dissolve? Do they not? We'd put them on the stove to see, do they catch fire or do they not? Do they crump up into like a big like mass of carbon, or do they really start becoming inflammable? What really happens? How much force should I hammer it with to see when it breaks? So we used to do like anecdotal evidence testing on our own. But these are some of the properties. And then in terms of manipulation, when I was telling you, you can coat it. So we have, I'll actually show you some samples. So this sample is not completely waterproof. So if I put water on it, it'll penetrate and come out from the other side. So it's porous. But a very similar sample like this, which we have coated with a resin, is now waterproof. So I can use it as a tile in my toilet.
Interesting. Yeah.
Depending on how much, what kind of treatment I do. So how much I bake or heat or fire the spinal sample, how am I really curing it, can also change the properties. I have, like, this sample is waterproof. There is a very similar sample of this that I have, this one. If I dip this in water for about a day, it will become mulch. So the both ingredients are the same, but they've just been, one of them has been coated and one of them has not been coated. So you can manipulate that. And that's true for actually any bio-based material exploration you're doing. You can change and tweak those things very closely with recipes.
You've been exhibiting at Dutch Design Week, and I have always been curious why there is so much innovation happening, especially in Netherlands, when it comes to biomaterials.
Yeah.
And how was your experience at Dutch Design Week also? That we would love to know.
So I think, I mean, I'll be a little biased here, but I think in general, explorations in biomaterials has been quite big in the last like 5 years in the world. It's massive. It's suddenly a legit industry of its own.
Mhm.
Every other person, you have people making coasters with coffee grounds that are waste. You have people using waste from breweries and making like lamps out of it and shades out. So there's a lot of opportunity of from especially from the art and design community where they've really started experimenting and doing these things. But when you really look at like I was telling you, I'm fascinated by indigenous communities, and having been born in one, you see that much more closely. We've
Yeah.
naturally worked with bio-based materials a lot, whether it is from our leaf plates or it is from our dung plastered houses, or it is from the kind of roofing that we used to make with clay and natural materials, right? So it's all been there. But I think specifically with Europe's focus and Netherlands' focus, as a country, it wants to be zero emission by like I think 2050 is the aim now, not 2030. So if that's the aim, then everything needs to be turned around. Everything from where you get your energy to where you get your materials, because both of those are resources on which all industries are based: energy and material. And I think that's one of the reasons why you are seeing so much of that happening over here. If you see like I keep going to these exhibits of design schools and architecture schools. A lot of the work that the students are also exploring now are in similar domains. It's almost become like a trend which is passed on from each batch. So someone or the other picks up they'll pick up concrete waste, they'll pick up waste from clay. There's one lady who I saw the time when we displayed. She was making tiles with broken commodes in toilets and
Mhm.
basically fired glazed ceramics. What can you remake with it? So there's just,
Interesting.
yeah, I think this generation in general is wanting to find more answers that are localized, and that's where it is. But in India, it's all been there, but we've just seen it as a part of our life and not something that's innovative. So we just need to tweak our way around and reinvent what we already have.
So, since you have been running an Indo-Dutch design studio, so talking about the infrastructure and comparing both the countries, how different
Yeah.
is the infrastructure available for you to actually experiment with these materials and say
Yeah.
the lot of festivals happening? What is the situation in India right now, and how do you see the future when it comes to circularity in India?
Okay, two or three questions in one. Let me try
Yeah.
answering one at a time. I think you've used the right word. It's different. I
Yeah.
wouldn't put it in hierarchy at all. When we worked on Dungse, we worked both in India and in the Netherlands. So we were doing experiments. Lindy and I, who's our co-founder for Dungse, he and I were doing experiments in the Netherlands with cows and dung and resources here, and the team was doing the same in India. The difference over here was because here you have a lot of ecosystems that have been created already in place. So we had labs that we knew we could go to do certain testing. We had spaces we knew we could go ahead to do certain kind of manufacturing and things like that. There are lots of funds from the government that are available that you can apply for innovation and experiments, just feasibility study to see the feasibility of something. You have the government funding and promoting that. So it just facilitates and encourages more people like us to say, okay, let's go ahead and try it. Like we got the opportunity to get a grant for a research study with Wageningen University, which is one of the most accomplished universities for agriculture in the world. And we had their scientists and their bio-based scientists work with us on Dungse. And the government paid that money. We couldn't have afforded the university. So I think those kind of opportunities has been great in the Netherlands. And like you said, with exhibits like the Dutch Design Week, there's an ecosystem called the Material District here, which
Yeah.
builds libraries of bio-based materials. So all that houses in the Netherlands. So it becomes easy that ways. On the other hand, India is abundant on just resource in general. So, when we were doing experiments in India, we wanted to try hemp as one of the materials to experiment with. It was very easy to find that. We just reached out to a few people. They sent some samples to us and we started experimenting. We wanted to go learn a little bit more about, okay, how are people locally trying to manipulate dung? We literally just drove out of Ahmedabad and started going to villages and meeting a bunch of people, And we actually learned some 2 or 3 different ways of treating dung from 2 or 3 different people who were doing it locally for their region. So there's just abundant knowledge and just willingness of people to help you, to guide you, to work with you and share what they have with you that's available. We didn't have to think once before saying, Acha, where can I find a factory to try this out? Or where can I find a press to go do this? In the Netherlands, I have to book the press, I have to book the lab. So in India, I think just the resources are so abundant. And for cow dung specifically, there was so much knowledge already that that became an opportunity. So it's just different. I think we wouldn't have been able to do what we did with Dungse if either of these 2 countries didn't exist for us. So I think it's been a very interesting mix of the opportunities and funds here and the local knowledge and resources in India, which kind of did the trick. Now, to answer your second question, which was about the future of circularity in India, I am no big expert to really be able to answer that question. But just to talk from the little experience that I have, I've worked in urban waste before this for a lot of years. And then now, of course, I'm working with shit. So in India, the more you start looking deeply, and I'm not going to talk about our urban context because they're very, very driven by the West and Western philosophies.
True.
But if we just look at our day-to-day lifestyle, where your kitchen was a medicine store, your grandmother knew when you have this pain, then this is what has to be mixed in milk and given to you. Every remedy for every health issue, like for my hair, my hair was like a fruit salad. I had psoriasis in my skin, and everything in the kitchen has been tried in my hair. The same on my skin. And those are things that till today they work, right? The same is true for materials we consume. So in waste, I used to give this example when I was working in urban waste that we were so used to eating our food in leaf plates, especially when we went outside or in paper plates, that it was a usual habit that I'm going to eat it and I'm going to crush it and I'm going to just go dump it under a tree because it'll compost away. Now, the behavior remained, but the material changed to plastic. And we did the exact same thing with dumping it under a tree. So we've shifted it halfway through, but not the whole way, right? So I feel like all the answers of circularity in India, and I realized that more after not being there I compost my waste at home over here. I recycle most of my clothes over here. In Europe, it's a trend. In India, it was a way of life. How many of
Mhm.
us remember piling up our newspapers very nicely because the kabadi wala is going to pay you?
We still
Nobody
do
pays
that.
me. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right here now you have an option where you go drop a glass bottle at the supermarket and they'll give you a cent, or same thing with plastic. But I very strongly feel we have so much of our informal ecosystem also, where people are recycling and taking things from you and extracting things with them and sending it back for production, where we don't see that as legit because it's all happening underground or just something that we've seen all our lives. So India just needs to look within and just embrace. I think that's what we need to do. That's what we're trying to do with Dungse. Just
Yeah,
embrace.
so maybe both literally and metaphorically, we have to close the loop and like go back
Yes.
to our roots in
Yes.
some ways.
Yes.
Very
Yes. Back to
interesting.
the future.
Yeah. So you brought up that there are libraries when it comes to bio-based material, like Material District on social media platform. There is
Yeah.
Materium and
Yeah.
other such platforms available. So how important do you think is the role of open source information and self-education when it comes to
Yeah.
biomaterials and circular economics?
Extremely important. There's absolutely no question there. And this is also another dilemma we've had all the time. When you're trying to create a viable business for sustainable innovation like Dungse, if I have to do things that really create impact, I need money, I need investment. When I go to an investor and say, please put money, they ask me, where's your IP?
I see.
Right? So, and if I don't have IP, if I open source it, I'm basically leaving it to the goodwill of people to say, I'll give you all this knowledge that I've created, but I'm hoping you will make something of this knowledge. So I think that it's an and equation. I don't think it's an either or. So open source is extremely important. Again, using the example of India, all the knowledge we've created from Ayurveda to yoga to like leaf plates to cow dung plasters is just there. It's just there for everyone to use. It's for the benefit of humanity. And this community driven thinking is essential for the world today. I am because we are. We really have to think that way. And then, if that's the case, if there is no difference between me and other, then everything is open source. My knowledge is our knowledge. So I think that as an attitude is very, very important. But to make that transition, I think there has to be, and I saw this challenge in the urban waste project that I was doing, the company I was working for, Daily Dump. um, we realized in Daily Dump that, when everything's open source, we had open source the designs of the composter for people to use. There's suddenly no value in it. It's really, it's like, theek hai, this is knowledge that is there, and I can use it if and when I want to. When you start attaching aspirations, you start attaching stories, you start attaching a real deeper meaning to it. If I own this, this is what it means. Then you really start shifting people's behavior towards that collective consciousness. So I think to make that transition, while you need to have open source, you also need to sort of protect a few things, refine them to an extent where you can build high, like if I make a high quality table with this tomorrow, people will see Cow Dung in new light. Cow Dung knowledge right now of plaster is there in the world, it's there in our country. How many of us make houses with it? But if the same thing I've tweaked, mastered, and really refined for today's lifestyle, and you can buy this for like 200 rupees a tile for your house, and it's this thing you're very, very proud to have, you would have suddenly shifted the behavior. So I think
Right.
it's an and, it needs a bit of both. Only open source, I wish as human beings we were wise to really make use of that kind of knowledge. We give into our demons too quickly. So open source will not be able to bring the impact, though it's important.
Yeah, very rightly said. I think the balance is important, and you drew like really great analogies and parallels there when it comes to open source and how Ayurveda has already been one such open source in India. Very interesting. So, how different has been the response and also the acceptance towards Dungse products in both the countries by the consumers?
Uh, Not very different. I think
I
we're
see.
all becoming very similar people now because the world's so connected. We were actually not hoping for a good response at all in the Netherlands. We thought people are just going to freak out and be like, what on earth is this? There was no, like when I used to, the farmer we were working with who used to give us the dung, when I would tell him, can I do experiments? Can I try plastering this in your shed and everything? And he's like, no, please, just, he's like, you guys can do that in India. That's great. I understand, but not here. Please, not here. So we were not very sure we'll get a great response. But at the Dutch Design Week, which was our first public display, when we put things out, I think people were just in a state of shock to see that the dung that they imagine as piles lying around, which smells a certain way from their memory, this is nothing like that. So just the fact that something could transform was enough to generate people's curiosity and make them really believe in it. So we had people like just come, and we'd allow everyone to touch and feel and take the samples and smell the samples and do all of that. And it was a phenomenal response. I have videos where people are just like, they're like, this feels so nice, and they're rubbing it on their face. She's so comfortable with it that she's okay to rub it on her face. So I think it really, I mean, and that's where design comes in. We're naturally, as a species, we are learned to see beauty as something safe. When you see beauty in nature, you know it's safe. You see symmetry, you see balance, you see certain amount of safety and more predictability in it. So the moment you transform things to nice and curiously exciting, you can change people's perception towards it. So in Netherlands that happened. In India, people were of course not repulsed by it in any way, because everyone's experienced Cow Dung somewhere in their life or the other. But they were definitely surprised with what leaps it could take in terms of its look and feel. So even our professors at NID, because our studio is based in Gandhinagar, we used to go down to our design school, and because we're all graduates from there, so we would just go and catch up with our faculty, meet our director, and then just show them some of these samples. And with those people who had been in this sector and space of materials for so long, also were amazed at how much dung could transform. So I think it was just, yeah, there was just a lot of amazement in everybody's eyes of, oh my god, that's possible, okay, great, let's do it. I think that's what we had people write down. Can you make jewelry for me? Somebody said, can you make a tiny house for me? Somebody said,
Interesting.
I'm redoing my house. Can you actually make the roof for me? So there's a lot of faith, which is what actually made us decide that we should make it a company. Until then, it was an experiment.
That is so good to hear. So, and now cow dung is a material that you find everywhere, right? And it is
Yeah.
also available in abundance. So, do you imagine like a decentralized revolution happening where maybe say local communities are creating products with cow dung? What is your aim and vision with Dungse?
That's the utopia I imagine. Yes, in a short sentence, what you just said, exactly that. One of the reasons we had picked cow dung in the time when, like I was saying, right, what is a future proof material? How do you define that? Localization was a very important element for us. A great material like cork, it is so efficient, so effective. It is still the bark of a tree in a certain part of the world. We have to ship it to other parts. And with
Yeah.
the way its consumption is increasing and its demand is increasing, how much are you going to really rip those barks apart, or how many more trees will you really grow? What will that do to the ecosystem of Portugal in the future? So, like that, we realize dung is just something that's everywhere. Every country has its own set of cows, every country has its own set of dung. And when we were making our samples, the species of cows that we had here, a lot of Frisian cows, are different from. So in India, we had all kinds. We had Jersey, Frisian. We even had our own indigenous cows. We tried all kinds of dung, and the samples were coming out the same. Only a little bit of color would look different, but in general, the tiles and their behavior and everything was very, very similar. So we realized you can make the same thing anywhere. The idea is to create a decentralized production setup. So we're trying to right now figure out a business model to make one unit. What defines one unit? Where you have one farmer or a group of farmers, you have a company that processes the dung that they bring to hygienize it so that it can legally move around. From there, you have either us or a third party that's wanting to make products with it, that takes all that dung as a raw material, and then that whole thing is processed into a product which goes to consumers. And then consumers have a place where they can drop this material once its lifetime is over, if it's broken down or they want to change the product or whatever, things like that. So how do you make that one whole unit so the nutrient flow remains, and make it for each region? So make one for Netherlands and its own production needs, make one for India and its own production needs. We have a few people from the US who have reached out to us, because in ranches there you have a very similar problem.
Fantastic.
So imagine if every ranch had its own little ecosystem of production and processing, everything right there. That's the aim. So every region can use its own source of dung for itself. And yeah, that's not going to be viable fully because a lot of regions don't have surplus, but the ones that do can.
I mean, that's fascinating. And at the same time, I think you brought up really important questions like how long can we keep exporting, say, cork or other material that seem sustainable right now, but maybe, that once people start consuming it in excess, that could become a problem. So, coming to our next question, how important do you think in today's world is the intersection of design and science for solutions to climate change and the environmental crisis that we face?
Oh, very important. I mean, I'm an example. I'm a living example of
Yeah.
that. I sit at the intersection of four domains, and now I'm planning to get into biology also. I think it's very important at an individual and at a community level. We all need to be working together with different paradigms really intersecting, so that every idea and solution we create is multifaceted and nothing remains an afterthought. That's one of the problems with things we create, because you have an engineer think only in one way and they make an app and they produce something out of it. You have a designer think only in one way, they make something great as an experience, but nothing comes out of it, so it has to be everyone really working together. We individually also need to learn to, if not be, we can't be experts at many things, but at least know how you can understand different domain, how you can understand the impact. If I'm producing this pen tomorrow, I should be able to understand the material context from a material expert. I should be able to understand its behavioral concept from the way it looks and feels, its ergonomic. So all of that has to come. Where is the material coming from? who is going to produce it, how much energy goes into producing it. So we need to do that at an individual, but importantly at a community level. So and this is my ask to essentially everyone who's starting or working on a new idea, please do it in as diverse and multidisciplinary a team as you can, or at least talk to people from other disciplines, even if you can't have them in the team. We've tried to do that very actively with all our work in the studio, and of course with Dungse as well. So listen to the farmer, listen to the processing company, listen to a capitalist who's selling tiles to make houses, because each of them is going to play a role in what you're creating. So yeah, very important to answer your question.
True. So Dungse is already very promising as a material, as a biomaterial and a circular material, but I'm sure there are some other biomaterials that excite you equally. Can you name a few?
Oh my God. Um, okay, one biomaterial I'm personally very excited about is algae. It's
Same
highly
here.
underutilized
Yeah.
in the world. There's so much potential with algae. That's something we were trying to make, actually conceptualize an architectural facade in the studio to imagine how we could use algae. That's one material I think I would like to in the future explore. There's a lot of potential. Mycelium was a great material that's taken its own life. I mean, it's a legit mainstream material now. I won't even call it an alternative anymore. But mushrooms, yeah, that ways are a great source to create something like mycelium. Which other material? So sometimes in my head, I'm also, I mean, what essentially accounts for a material? There are some times when we're experimenting and working where even light behaves as a material. So you really, where do you draw the line of the material also is something I would like to then question of in the future of bio-based materials. Like there's a designer in the Netherlands who does a lot of light experimentation and work, and he had recently made an art installation with UVA light to actually create a big ring where people could stand in different places next to each other, so they were far away to not catch infection, but also to sanitize themselves under that light. Now
I
that's a
see.
bio-based material for me, right? So we could
Interesting.
even reinvent the boundary of bio-based materials, but yeah, in conventional terms, algae would be one. And I'm very fascinated with all forms of shit. I think we'll scale up our business to involve, because pig shit nobody wants to use at all. Chicken shit is a big mess in the Netherlands. That also needs, like, there's opportunity to do things with. Human shit, there's immense opportunity to do things with. So yeah,
Yeah,
we may just become a business of shit.
true. But maybe for that, like we'll have to move, say, like using water to tissue paper first, because I think
Not
that
really.
not really, because I
Not
think
really.
in collecting and like all those things that happen, maybe say uh, compost toilets, you need
Yeah.
to maybe say separate.
So
People
it
are not
depends.
even ready to use compost toilets in India right now.
I know. But no, it really depends. See, with Dungse also, we did physical experiments to make composites. So physically mixing things up to make composites. In that case, yes, you would want things that are nice and frail and dry, or at least in a way where you can transport it. But when
Mhm.
you start the other kinds of experiments we did some chemical experiments also to actually chemically alter the biomass of dung and then see what we get. So we had made this one composite where it was completely white because we had managed to naturally bleach the dung with just some bio-based materials.
Super interesting.
Then we also did an experiment which was a biological experiment where we used dung slurry and a few other things and landed up creating a form of like vegan leather. So we had like this skin that came out in the end, which was tear proof. Like we were not able to really tear it except for when we really wanted to cut it out. It could stretch to an immense amount of degree. It was translucent. So when you have it, it really comes down to what kind of technique do you want to use to make composites. It may not always be physical. So for chemical and biological experiments, you could actually again use content the way it is available in like sewage, for example. So there's you just have to pivot your way of thinking, and I think there's nature has answers. You just have to find them.
Got it. I understand. So we talked about various materials that could be potential biomaterials and maybe say could become mainstream material like mycelium already has. But generally speaking, like Netherlands is like already accepting a lot of biomaterials as materials. But what are some key challenges that the whole industry, if you could, club all the biomaterials in one industry, faces
Hmm.
when it comes to adoption of biomaterials?
Yeah, that's an important question. And we also ponder about it a lot. I think one gap I've seen in biomaterials, conventional to traditional materials, which we really have to bridge where industry is also conservative, is consistency. Biomaterials come from materials from nature, whether we're using a waste stream or whether we're growing mycelium. It's nature doing its job. We face this in cow dung, in cow dung as well. To get the same consistency of quality as well as volumes throughout the year is a challenge that we have to tackle if we're making biomaterials viable, because the industry thrives on that. They plan their projection saying, I need to make so many floors, so many tiles, so many houses in so many days. So we need to be able to provide them that same quality of certified output that we had promised them, and in the volumes that they want. Or if we have to scale it up,
Right.
we should be able to. So I think that idea of scale is interesting. Or if we don't want to scale the conventional way, then we need to really define the entire economic model to say, okay, scale means something else for biomaterials, and here's how it'll generate value for everyone. So that's a more fundamental question than we should answer if that's the route to go. But for the shorter route, it's one is consistency and the other is quality. I think that's been one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in and around over here. And the other one is because bio-based materials are also a little young, new to the world. Uh, there's no way I can tell you Dungse is going to last 20 years. I mean, I can
Yeah.
do tests. There are legit tests and certification that I can do. I can make it go through extreme temperature testing and things like that to see how much it cracks or not. But you really have to see it to believe it, to see it out there for 10, 12, 15 years to say, okay, this is going to last. So I mean, we just need to give it a little bit more time. I think that problem will get tackled. We're just a little young right now, to especially for traditional industries to agree to us and say that, okay, I'm going to give you a try. So it's a little bit of a matter of time there also, is what we've faced with Dungse. I mean, again, just speaking purely from experience.
Yeah. True. So basically, I think it's the most important thing is scalability, consistency, quality. And I personally feel that maybe, say, like within the whole industry, there are micro communities, and say like dung is one material. So if somebody else is also working with cow dung, so we also need to talk as an industry within the industry about the failures,
Yeah,
like because nobody's putting the failures out there on the social media or in
yeah,
communities. So maybe
yeah.
once you like put it out there, publish it, and so that the community members itself could
Normalize.
could come up with solutions, and that could accelerate the whole process of
Yeah.
solving some key issues that are there.
Agreed.
uh,
It works both ways. One is, of course, like people can come forward and assist, but the other is to also normalize these failures. I mean,
yeah,
you're
yeah,
not going to get it
exactly.
right the first time, and it's okay. I mean, that's the whole point. If Da Vinci had seen, sort of seen the world the same way, we wouldn't have so many things we have.
Right.
So yeah, it works both ways. But you're right. That's where again that collective, that idea of a collective working together is more important than ever today. So we need to do that.
Right. So I think now we have a fair idea about what Dungse is and what you guys are planning to do in future. And also
Yeah.
it was very interesting to talk about the biomaterials and what is happening in Netherlands. So I'm sure you guys are doing some exciting projects with Studio Carbon as well in India.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about some projects that you're doing currently?
Yes, of course. So, like I was saying, for us in the studio, design is just a medium to bring about positive change. In studio, we say our vision is to realize harmonious futures. So, to realize futures we all envision, but also futures where everyone's in harmony with everything. So there's a balance essentially of forces there. And with that vision, we've been doing a lot of work in both our labs, but also with startups and older companies that are coming to us to work with us to use design for a better world. We're doing projects in the space of food. Food is something that fascinates us a lot as well. So we've been working right now on a project to see how we can essentially go back to the idea of food pharmacy, of starting to understand where our food comes from. You ask a 5-year-old today, where's your tomato coming from? They'll probably tell you the supermarket, because they don't
Yeah.
know, they don't understand where it's growing, they don't
Right.
understand the concept of farming and soil and seed and everything, until of course they're taught all of that. So we need to start rebuilding our relationship with food to really understand, and that's a project that we've been doing. Water is something we have been very, very deeply immersed in thinking about, both literally and metaphorically. So we've done an entire systems research on the problem of water, what all is it connected to, where are the opportunities to improve it, and things like that. And manifesting that knowledge now, we're now working with a very innovative company from South Africa that actually makes these um, sewage treatment plants, home level sewage treatment plants, which are based on biomimicry. So they use a very natural process. There's no chemical, so to say, involved, but that's the research and work we've done in water has now kind of translated into that. We've been very, very excited about seeing what design can do for space. And when I say space, I mean outer space and orbital space. We had done a big systems research on understanding the problem of space debris, which none of us really consciously know of. But space debris is as much a problem as plastic in the oceans right now, and it's only growing. The whole orbit that design research work we have done there, which we've now been in conversations in different capacities to help scientists and other technological organizations to use our knowledge of design to build some of those solutions. So it's and we've tried to not keep a domain that we cannot contribute to as design. So it's kind of all over in terms of the wicked problems that we're trying to handle.
Got it. It's very interesting. Like nobody talks about space debris, and I'm sure like that would be something to work on and also create awareness about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are your dreams ahead as an individual and maybe say both a studio?
I think as a studio, I've already told you our dreams. We
Yeah.
really see design making an impact, like essentially making a positive dent in the universe in every possible way. Design is that one stream which allows you, like I was telling earlier, to think ambiguously, allows you to embrace uncertainty. When we start developing a solution in design, you don't say ye end mein banana hai, isko kaise banana hai, what's the shortest path. You say I will understand the problem properly and then see what potential solutions it needs, and then make a solution. So I feel like, I mean, COVID has taught us that the only way to be resilient is to really handle uncertainty and work with it.
Right.
And I think that's what design really enables, not just itself, but enables all the other industries to do. So as a studio, if we can work with every possible sector or domain and really create a positive impact with them, where nothing remains an afterthought, that's what our vision is as a studio. So really making those harmonious futures. Individually, I mean, I don't make too many plans, so I don't have plans as such. Design was, I think, a direction that I chose and said, okay, this is the way I want to make the world a better place, and that's what I'll pursue. So the idea will be to continuously and very consciously make choices where I can continue to do that, and nothing else. And like I said, yeah, probably get into biology. So neuroscience is the next thing that's fascinating me. So study that,
Awesome.
and yeah, just keep learning a bunch of new things every other day. With no big dreams and plans. Life will unfold.
Great. Thank you for sharing your dreams. And also, this whole conversation has been very educational and it has definitely opened up new perspectives for me. And I'm sure the listeners also must have got a lot of value out of it. But before we say bye or leave, I would love for you to ask some what if questions to the listeners as a food
Yes.
for thought, maybe for them to strive for a more sustainable future.
Perfect. Sounds good. I was expecting this question. So I've actually ask the carbons also. So I'm going to speak on behalf of
Yeah.
all the carbons. And I have a bunch of very interesting what ifs for us and all of us to think about. I'll just read some of those out to you.
Yeah.
One what if is, what if in the future we could do photosynthesis? How would the world be different if our consumption completely changed and we started consuming like plants? Another what if is, this is very, very relevant to sustainability. So, what if we could track every exchange of value between every living thing? How would we then change the model of economics? Because value would mean many, many things then and not one. Another what if is, okay, this is kind of my favorite, but again, bias. What if humans developed an entire civilization that was completely female centric in terms of leadership? So the vision, the way it grew, the way it developed, the way it expanded was embedded on the fundamental principles of nurturing and collectivism and all of that. What could that be? There are some more. What if we could reimagine the relationship between an individual and a collective? What would that yield? And when I say collective, not just amongst humans, but amongst all beings, how would that change our relationship with nature? Um, what if plants became the dominant species? Where would that put humans then? What exactly would we be doing differently? And yeah, finally, just something to kind of end this conversation with. What if we just stopped moving? How would the earth, the world be a different place if humans stopped moving? If we figured out a way of sustaining ourselves like a tree does? And we saw that happen in COVID when our movement restricted so much that we, of course, could see Himalayas from Delhi, and you could see the vibrations of the earth going dampening down because we had less airplanes. I mean, so much happened. So, what if humans just stopped moving? These are just some crazy things we keep thinking about at the studio, but I hope they trigger some interesting thoughts in your head as well.
Those are some super intriguing questions, and I'm sure you could do like take it up as individual topics for podcast in
Yes,
future. That would be
yes.
very interesting. So thank you so much for your time, Itika, and it has been an absolute delight talking to you, and I'm still in awe of the things that you have already spoken, and
Thank
would
you. Thank you so
definitely
much.
like dwell onto it more like as I listen to it again.